Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakambitam Cha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishware Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We're reading from the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, text 36. So if you can go to 1836 or put it up on the screen either way. But if everyone can repeat, I'm going to be saying the TV, three with the I, three anim. Sometimes people try to say that separate and then idanim. So TVI. Sukham tvidanim trividam.
Sukham tvidam trividam.
Sukham tvidanim trividam.
Sukham tvidanim trividam.
Shanu me bharatarshava.
Shanu me bharatarshava.
Abhyasad ramate yatra.
Abhyasad ramate yatra.
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
Sukham tridanim trividam.
Sukham tvidanim trividam.
Shrinu me bharatarshava.
Shanu me bharatarshava.
Yasa ramate yatra.
Abhyasad ramate yatra.
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
Sukham tvidanim trividam.
Sukham tvidanim trividam.
Shinu me bharatarshava.
Shanu me bharatarshava.
Abhyasa ramate yatra.
Abhyasad ramate yatra.
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
Sukham tvidanim trividam.
Sukham
tvidanim trividam.
Me bharatarshava.
Shanu me bharatarshava.
Abhyasad ramate yatra.
Abhyasad ramate yatra.
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
Sukham tvidvinam trividam.
Okay. Sukham tvidanim trividam.
Shrunu me bharatarshava.
Shranu me bharatarshava.
Abhyasad ramate yatra.
Abhyasad ramate yatra.
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
Sukham tvidanim trividam.
Sukham tvidanim trividam.
Shinu me bharatarshava.
Shanu me bharatarshava.
Abhyasad ramate yatra.
Abhyasad ramate yatra.
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
Sukham tam idanim trividam.
Sukham tvidanim trividam.
Shrunu me bharatarshava.
Shranu me bharatarshava.
Abhaya shadramate yatra.
Abhyasad ramate yatra
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
dukhantam cha nigacchati.
Sukham.
Sukham.
Happiness.
Two.
Two.
But
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 idanim.
Idhanim.
Now.
Now.
Trividam.
Trividam.
Vidam.
Of three kinds.
Of
Three
three kinds.
kinds.
Renew.
Shunu.
Renew.
Here.
Here.
May.
May.
From me.
From
Of
me.
me.
Bharata Rishabha.
Bharata-rishabha.
O best among the Bharatas.
O best among the Bharatas.
Abhyasat.
Abhyasat.
By practice.
By
By
practice.
Ramate.
Ramate.
One enjoys.
One
One
enjoys.
enjoys.
Yatra.
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 Where.
Where
Dukkha.
dukkha.
Or distress.
Of
distress.
distress.
Antam.
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 The end.
The end.
Cha.
Cha.
Also.
Also.
Higachati.
Nigacchati.
Gains.
Gains.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. O best of the Bharatas, now please hear from me about the three kinds of happiness by which the conditioned soul enjoys, and by which he sometimes comes to the end of all distress. Purport. The conditioned soul tries to enjoy material happiness again and again. Thus he chews the chewed. But sometimes, in the course of such enjoyment, he becomes relieved from material entanglement by association with a great soul. In other words, a conditioned soul is always engaged in some type of sense gratification. But when he understands by good association that it is only a repetition of the same thing, and he is awakened to his real Krishna consciousness, he is sometimes relieved from such repetitive so-called happiness. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharani Nivasesa Sunyavadi Prastachade Satarani. O best of the Bharatas, now please hear from me about the three kinds of happiness by which the conditioned soul enjoys, and by which he sometimes comes to the end of all distress. So in this chapter, they talk about the three modes of nature quite a bit and different things. And now we're actually going to speak about happiness. Happiness in the mode of goodness, happiness in the mode of passion, and happiness in the mode of ignorance. But here, Krishna is saying, and Prabhupada is also elaborating on, that every single conditioned soul is trying to enjoy some type of happiness. And sometimes this enjoyment spirit for this happiness, this chewing the chewed, is relieved by association with a pure devotee. Association with devotees can sometimes get one to stop this whole cycle. In other words, right now in the material world, if you have no idea of Krishna consciousness, if you have no association with devotees, all you know is how to try to enjoy happiness in one of those three modes of nature, or a combination of the three modes of nature. Enjoy happiness sometimes in goodness, sometimes in passion, sometimes in ignorance, and generally more of one than the other for each individual. And there is no other choice But there is another choice, and that's to get free from this enjoying spirit altogether. Trying to not enjoying spirit because you still enjoy, but you enjoy transcendentally or spiritually. The soul is joyful by nature, so we're constantly looking for enjoyment because that's our nature. We just naturally enjoy. How do we naturally enjoy? By serving Krishna. And how is that? How do I enjoy by serving Krishna? Just as the hand enjoys by taking food, putting it in its mouth and the stomach, and it goes to the stomach, and then the hand is nourished. So we can become happy when we engage in serving Krishna. We're part and parcel of Krishna. When we please Krishna, we become pleased. So that's a transcendental happiness. That's not one of these three types of happiness. But sometimes when we just get tired of it, what's the use? I've tried this again and again and again. There's a rock and roll group from the 60s, and I think they're still even going on today. I don't know, but they've gone on for a long time. It's called the Rolling Stones, and they had a song, a very famous song. It was a big, big hit, and it was, I can't get no satisfaction, but I try and I try and I try, but I can't get no satisfaction. So the Rolling Stones, they had materially everything. They had followers, they had money, they had fame. They may not have had beauty, but they had a lot of the opulences, and still they were not happy. They were not satisfied because they're saying, in other words, if I have all facility for happiness and I try my best to enjoy this happiness, and I still see it doesn't satisfy me, then I sometimes, by the association of a pure devotee, I'll give up this endeavor of trying this way and try a different way, and then I can actually become happy. So this verse is dealing with, in general, how everyone is trying to enjoy. There's another little story I remember is, everyone wants to enjoy, everyone wants to be happy, and everyone also has to serve. We all have to serve. We have to serve our parents, we have to serve our teachers, we have to serve our boss, we have to serve our husbands, we have to serve our wives, we have to serve our children, we have to serve our society. Everyone has to serve. So an intelligent person can look for, who is that person that I can serve that will make me the happiest? Because I want to be happy and I have to serve. And there's no greater satisfaction we can get, even from serving our children. Sometimes you serve your children and they just have nothing to do with you. On my experience, it's more with Western children, but there's some Indian children who are like that too. You do all this service and they don't appreciate it. With Krishna, you serve Krishna, he becomes obliged to reciprocate. He never forgets. One of his qualities is he's grateful. He's grateful. Anything we do for him, he's grateful, and he'll never forget what we did. Whereas some other people, your husband, your wife, what have you ever done for me? I don't know if anybody had that experience. I don't think devotees have that so much, but the materialists definitely have that. Boyfriend, girlfriend, or relative, father, son. In a lot of relationships in the material, what have you done for me? It's interesting how President Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I mean, it's a nice thing to have something greater to serve, so some people serve their country. But we can do that even with God. Ask not what God can do for you, which we know he can do so much for us, but don't ask him for that. Ask what you can do for him. So that when we have that attitude of service to the greatest personality, then we can become satisfied, truly happy. And otherwise, we try to seek happiness any other way, and we will not find it. Actually, in this verse here, it says, thus he, in the purport, thus he choose the chewed. Okay, who spoke about this in the Bhagavatam? Chewing the chewed. Anybody know? I know Jiva knows.
Prahlad Maharaj?
Prahlad Maharaj, is that a question or you? And who's saying that? Is that Gita Mala?
Yes.
You're right. Now I'm sure a lot of people were thinking the same thing, but they weren't sure enough. But you were brave enough to say yes. And I'll read the verse here. I figured I'd ask who would know that before I read the verse, because if I read the verse, it might give it away. Shri Prahlad Uvacha, Matirna Krishne Paratas Vato Va Mito Vipadyeta Griha Ritanam Adanta Gobir Vishatam Tamishram Puna Punaschai Vita Chavananam. Prahlad Maharaj replied, because of their uncontrolled senses, persons too addicted to materialistic life make progress toward hellish conditions and repeatedly chew that which has already been chewed. Their inclinations toward Krishna are never aroused, either by the instructions of others, by their own efforts, or by a combination of both. Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.30. So this is in the material world. We think there is nothing else, but sometimes we actually come to our senses by the association of the pure devotee. And if you look at the history of this movement, when Prabhupada came, there were many hippies. They called them hippies, but what were hippies? They were people who didn't want to follow the status quo, who didn't want to follow what their parents did. They saw their parents, they work hard, they do all this, and they're not happy. So they decided, I mean, not consciously, I think they just decided this, but decided to do whatever makes them happy. And they tried this. So they really engaged in intoxication because that made them happy, illicit sex because that made them happy. They tried so many of these things, but ultimately it didn't make them happy. They went overboard. So somebody might think that if I had, I'm enjoying this. If I had more, that would be wonderful. But it doesn't matter how much you have, you're still not going to be happy. Then you might come to a point where this doesn't make me happy. Is there something else? And of course, Srila Prabhupada came and met these people, mostly hippies. And he basically told them to give all of this up and they can be happy. There was one person who was very much propagating LSD. I don't remember who it was, but he was a big LSD leader. And LSD is a psychedelic drug. And he said to, Prabhupada said, this is, or I don't know if Prabhupada said this, but I believe Prabhupada also said that this is greater, this pleasure, this happiness is greater than LSD. So they challenged Prabhupada, have you ever tried LSD? And Prabhupada said, no, but my disciples have. You can ask them. So it's a higher taste. Param dvistvar nivartate. By experiencing a higher taste, you can give up the lower taste. So these people who are more into sense gratification than anyone else in the world at that time, who went, that was their only thing. It's like, why work? I don't like work. Work's not good, so I won't work. I'll do other things. Sell drugs or something else, so that I don't have to work and I can just enjoy. Or if I work at some job that doesn't take much, it's easy to do. But it was avoiding things that I don't like and just doing things that I like. And by following that philosophy, none of them became happy. And even Prabhupada said, I've changed these hippies to happies. Made them happy. They were hippies and now they're happies. So this idea of enjoying is there within all of us, and we all try to enjoy, but ultimately it's just chewing the chewed, tried it, and trying it again, keep trying. And it's foolish. But if we somehow can surrender to Krishna, we can get a higher taste and we can give up the lower taste. So before I go on, does anyone have any questions on anything I said so far?
The translation said that the person finds some happiness. How does the person find happiness in chewing the
Get
chew?
some happiness. Take some intoxication. You feel happy. It's not real happiness. It doesn't last, and then you're in a worse shape later on.
But it says comes to the end of all distress. That's the part
Oh, the way Prabhupada says, because you finally come to the end of all distress by giving this idea of how to enjoy by chewing the chewed. You give it up. O best of the Bhartas, now please hear from me about the three kinds of happiness by which the conditioned soul enjoys, and by which he sometimes comes to the end of all distress. So Krishna set this whole thing up where you're in this illusion thinking you're enjoying, but eventually you're thinking, this isn't really making me happy. So sometimes people come to this point and then they search for something else. In the Bible, he who seeks shall find. Knock and the door shall be open. So if you endeavor, if that's what you want, then Krishna will send someone to help you.
So the end of all distress is not from the happiness that you're temporarily gaining. It is from actually understanding that it's not giving me happiness.
Yes, and search, and then coming to the association of a pure devotee. When you see that, Krishna will send someone. You somehow come to some higher taste. I mean, even before Prabhupada came, you might get, surrender to Jesus, not like a fanatic Christian, but realize who Jesus was. And as a Westerner, we didn't really have too many transcendental personalities that we could follow. Whereas in India, there's so many, but of course, there's so many bogus ones too. And you don't know, some people who are not sincere get cheated.
Yeah, that I can understand. That ultimately, after all the temporary happinesses, you recognize it's not giving you permanent happiness.
It's not satisfying you. Just like, okay, the Rolling Stones sang, I can't get no satisfaction, but they kept trying. They still kept trying. He said, but I try, and I try, and they can't get no satisfaction. But they still went on another 40 years trying. I mean, they had some association. I can tell you one thing. We had a Rath Yatra, a small Rath Yatra in Boston, where we had just a cart where we pushed, and we just went on a sidewalk. And we had kirtan, big kirtan party. We went into the park, and we didn't know anything else. But the next day, there was paparazzi, and the leader of the Rolling Stones, what's his name?
Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger. There's a picture of him in the newspaper in this big hotel, very expensive hotel, downtown Boston. on his balcony taking pictures of the devotees in the kirtan. And he had some association with the devotees previously to that in the beginning in England when they were associating with the Beatles. So he heard the kirtan and he went out and maybe he got some happiness there. He took some pictures and the paparazzi took pictures of him taking pictures of the devotees. But the people they're not so, you can't be satisfied. It's just a big illusion. Just trying to be happy materially is such an illusion. And the devotees, most of the devotees came to that conclusion. I mean, it's not that we're not seeking happiness anymore, even materially, because we're conditioned. We're not pure devotees. And when you become a pure devotee, you get all kinds of opulence so that you can enjoy, but you have no interest in enjoying. Actually, I copied this from the Bhagavatam, 10th canto. Well, I'll read the let's see, where is this verse? I don't know where it's from. Well, it's 10:81, I think, chapter 81. Anyway. Being the direct witness in the hearts of all living beings, Lord Krishna fully understood why Sudama had come to see him. Thus he thought, in the past, my friend has never worshipped me out of a desire for material opulence. But now he comes to me to satisfy his chaste and devoted wife. I will give him riches that even the immortal demigods cannot obtain. And then the purport, Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti comments that the Lord momentarily wondered, how has it come about, despite my omniscience, he's omniscient, he knows everything, that this devotee of mine has fallen into such poverty? You know, how can that happen? He's my devotee. And I'm omniscient. I don't know how it happened. Then quickly understanding the situation, he spoke to himself the words related in this verse. And then it says, but someone may point out that Sudama should not have been so poverty-stricken, since appropriate enjoyment comes as a byproduct of service to God, even for a devotee who has no ulterior motive. So someone might say, how is it? He's a devotee. How come he's so poor? He doesn't have anything, okay? This is really interesting. At least I find it interesting. Since appropriate enjoyment comes as a byproduct of service to God, even for a devotee who has no ulterior motives. So even though you don't want anything, if you're serving God, he gives you stuff. And this is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9:22. Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paripasate tesham nityabhyuktanam yogashema vahami aham. But those who always worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. So the purport continues. In response to this point, a distinction must be made between two kinds of renounced devotees. So this is the part I find very interesting. There's two kinds of renounced devotees. They're both renounced, but there's two kinds. So what are the kinds? One kind is inimical to sense gratification. And the other is, so you might think, aren't they both inimical? No. The other is indifferent to it. He's indifferent to sense gratification. He doesn't care if I get it or I don't get it. Whereas one does not want sense gratification. He's inimical to it. He doesn't want any opulence. He doesn't want to enjoy this material world in any way. And the other one doesn't matter. But so then the Supreme Lord does not force sense gratification upon the devotee who is extremely averse to worldly enjoyments. So if someone is averse to worldly enjoyments, a devotee, he doesn't give it to them. This is seen among such great renouncers as Judd Bart. On the other hand, the Lord may give limitless wealth and power to a devotee who is neither repelled nor attracted by material things, such as Prahlad Maharaj. Up to this point in his life, Sudam Brahmana was totally averse to sense gratification. So that's how Krishna didn't give him anything, because he was averse to it. But now, out of compassion for his faithful wife, and also because he hankered to have Krishna's audience, he went to beg from the Lord. And that's the Bhagavatam 1081, 6 and 7. So I think that's so nice how the two kind of renounced devotees, one who does not want any material opulence and one who's indifferent to material opulence. And at first, you know, Krishna's thinking, why is it that he's so poor? Why he's my devotee? Why didn't I give him? Then he realized he was adverse to material opulence. That's why I didn't give him. But now he wants it, so I'll give it to him. And he gave him, of course, more opulence than Indra himself. Now, this is for pure devotees. Now, for us, we get some opulence because we're still, he's just helping us along. If he took everything away, it would be too much for us, whatever. He's putting us in a situation that's very conducive for us to surrender. But ultimately, we shouldn't care whether we get material opulence or we don't get material opulence. It's all up to Krishna. Or we should not want it because I don't want it because I'm afraid I'll be tempted by it. So let me not have it at all.
Very nice. I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, I think it's also really nice. Boy, because most devotees, I mean, some devotees have material. I mean, if you look at Prabhupada, he had nothing. I mean, he really had nothing when he came here. Even before coming here, he didn't have much. Even when he was a householder, his businesses didn't do very well. But then when he completely just gave up everything and did what his Guru Maharaj wanted completely, 100%, then he got everything. He had a skyscraper in Manhattan at one time. He had so many houses, buildings, temples all over, farms, restaurants all over the world. He had so many people who would do anything for him. And he wasn't interested in trying to enjoy any of it. He just was always, and he didn't even come to the point that now I'm satisfied. I got so much, I've done so much, so many people. He was never satisfied. He always tried to push more and more until everyone, which of course not everyone became Krishna conscious, but that would be the only time he'd be satisfied. And maybe then now he'd use NASA to go to other planets to spread Krishna consciousness, but he didn't go that far. You know, but he wanted everyone to be a devotee. So when you actually surrender to Krishna, then he does give you material opulence. I mean, that's the example, the perfect example is Srila Prabhupada. It's not that Prabhupada wasn't surrendered, but he was being tested and he was being also glorified. Krishna put him in this position to glorify him, have nothing at all, and try to spread this movement with nothing. If you have something, it's easier. You know, even Prabhupada says every endeavor takes capital. So he had to get money somehow. So how is he doing it? He just preached, and people gave him money. One person wanted to learn how to make chapatis, and he told him, I'll teach you how to make chapatis for $100. So he gave him $100, and he got to learn how to make chapatis with Prabhupada. I'd give $1,000 or more. So this is when you surrender to Krishna, you get all facilities. And it's funny, when he was looking at buildings in New York, they were looking at $1 million buildings and they had no money whatsoever, but they're still looking because he knew Krishna, he would say Krishna is not a poor man. He can give you everything if you knew what to do with it. Okay, any other comments or questions before I go on to the next verse?
But generally, devotees don't get opulence, right?
Well, they talk about generally Brahmins are poor.
Like Jiva says, austerity is the wealth of the Brahmanas.
Yeah, well, it's not just Jiva says that. You know, Krishna.
Jiva quotes, I should say.
Yeah, but a Brahmin is not necessarily a devotee. A devotee is greater than a Brahmin. But when Brigamuni, kicked Vishnu in the chest, and the Garbhodakshai Vishnu, he, Vishnu was not displeased at all, but Lakshmi Devi was. So she's not very generous to the Brahmins. But I would think that, if you look at devotees, most devotees are not so poor like Sudam.
That is true.
They have plenty to live by. I remember when going to India. Now I'm from America, and I worked doing magic shows, and mentioning, somehow talking to these are householders that live outside the temple in Mumbai, in Chowpatty, and when they heard how much money I made, it was like I was really poor. And I'm in America, and I don't consider that I'm poor at all. But in America, I might be poverty stricken, but they were thinking I was even poor. Like for India, they all made way more money than I made. But I'm not going to tell you what my income taxes were or anything like that until my lawyers tell me it's okay.
And you'll divulge it in a couple of weeks, right?
Right after the election. But Prabhupada says that, the servant of the king lives almost as good as the king. So pointing out that if you live in the temple, you get a nice place to live, you get nice food because you get all prasadam that's offered to Krishna, you're taken care of. So you don't really need much. I remember in Boston, it's like you live, how much it would cost to live on Commonwealth Avenue, just, 1 block away from, what is that park? It's the Boston Gardens. It's like you have to have millions of dollars or make millions of dollars to live there. If you're renting or if you want to buy, it's millions of dollars. And we live there. I don't know if the other people like that we live there, but we live there. Right off of the Boston Commons.
I think they're used to us by now.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm sure they are. Okay, so let me read the next verse. Text 37. Yatad agre visham eva pariname mrito pamam tatsukam satvikam proktam atma buddhi prasadajam. That which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. Purport. In the pursuit of self-realization, one has to follow many rules and regulations to control the mind and the senses, and to concentrate the mind on the self. All these procedures are very difficult, bitter like poison. But if one is successful in following the regulations and comes to the transcendental position, he begins to drink real nectar and he enjoys life. So this is one example that Srila Prabhupada has given about happiness in the mode of goodness. That which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization. It's said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. So whatever we have to do to become Krishna conscious, at first it may seem like poison. But in the beginning, Prabhupada didn't even give many rules. Just chant Hare Krishna and listen to the lectures and eat the prasadam. He didn't even tell them not to eat meat, fish, or eggs. In the very beginning, for that went on for a while until they asked, are there any other rules, or are there any rules? They had no rules before then. And then he gave no illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication, no eating meat, fish, or eggs. So that in itself, those are the no's, the don'ts. And then there's the do's. Chant so many rounds a day, hear Srimad Bhagavatam every day, worship Tulsi. There's so many different things to do also. So there's things not to do and there are things to do. So these are the things, and at first they are not very pleasurable. And even sometimes after years, they're still not very pleasurable. But you make yourself do them because you know this is what's ultimately going to make me happy. There's a devotee once who was morose. He was not very happy. And Prabhupada asked him, are you happy? And he said, no. He said, then why are you doing this? He said, because I know that eventually I'll be happy. And Prabhupada said, that was very intelligent. So even if you're not happy, you do it. Just like your work, how many people are like really ecstatic going to work? You don't like it, but you do it because you have to get something. You have to survive in this material world. So you get something for your work. So that brings you some happiness ultimately, but the work itself isn't pleasurable. So at first it's going to school. I don't know about anybody else, but I really didn't like going to school. I like to play. I like the happiness in the mode of passion. Just immediately you're happy. And it didn't seem like it ever ended either as a kid. We played all day long, me and my friends, all day once we got out of school. And at night we go home and we all eat supper about the same time, then we all go back out and play. It was just play in New York City streets. But school was like I had to do it. I didn't want to do it. But there's certain things you have to do, whether you want to do them or not. So you make some sacrifice. I'll sacrifice something now so that I can enjoy later. So I can do what is necessary for self-realization. Prabhupada has given us so much to do, more than we can actually do. So there's no time for Maya. Prabhupada says when you're full with Krishna, then there's no time for Maya. Maya can't get in. If we have some gap, some space, some relaxation, then Maya can sneak in. So we have to become full with Krishna. And he certainly set up the whole program, daily program, early in the morning till late at night, and then sleep for 6 hours and back up doing the same thing again. And you actually can become happy doing that. And at first it's not. So that's a very good example Prabhupada has given of happiness in the mode of goodness. And it ultimately turns to transcendental happiness. Okay, any questions on goodness? Happiness in the mode of goodness, not just goodness. No? Well, we're going to go to another mode. Text 38. Vishayendriya samyogat yat tad agre mritopamam hariname visham eva tatsukam rajasam smritam. That happiness which is derived from contact of the senses with their objects and which appears like nectar at first but poison at the end is said to be of the nature of passion. Purport. A young man and a young woman meet, and the senses drive the young man to see her, to touch her, and to have sexual intercourse. In the beginning, this may be very pleasing to the senses, but at the end, or after some time, it becomes just like poison. They are separated, or there is divorce. There is lamentation, there is sorrow, etc. Such happiness is always in the mode of passion. Happiness derived from a combination of the senses and the sense objects is always a cause of distress and should be avoided by all means. So this is so nice that we have information of this doesn't bring us happiness and it brings us distress in the long run. In the short run, it seems so wonderful, but it doesn't last and it becomes really bad. And sometimes people hate each other so much they even kill each other. And sometimes the man, mostly the woman, would have to go to the courts and get some restraining order just to keep this crazy man away from them, who loves them so much and just can't stand that now we're separated because we want to kill each other. This is a material world, and there's so much divorce. I believe it's over 50% of the marriages end in divorce. So when you get married, you got like a 50-50 chance you'll stay together. It's not that good, like the debt to us part. It's not really that long till you stop satisfying my senses, and then we'll part. They make even marriage, it's just an agreement. You satisfy my senses and I'll satisfy your senses. But once it stops, then we don't want to keep this marriage going anymore. So the mode of passion is most people are trying to enjoy their senses, and that's happiness in the mode of passion. And every time you try to enjoy your senses, it doesn't work. You eat some food that tastes so good, and you eat and you overeat, and then you get sick. In mode of passion. So it doesn't. It's we have to eat, but we should eat. Even eating, we should eat transcendental foods, only prasadam, food that's been offered to Krishna with love and devotion. And then, of course, we have to eat. Not offer him any meat, fish, or eggs, onions, or garlic. He doesn't want those things. So if we love him, we give him what he wants. If you love somebody and they hate spinach, and then you serve them spinach, and then they let you know that you don't like it, and they serve it to you again, you're going to think that person doesn't like me very much. He doesn't want me to come to their house anymore. So you find out what the person likes and you make them that. That's love.
That's the way to get rid of a bad guest, huh?
No, Prabhupada said to get rid of a bad guest is you don't feed them. No, not even feeding them something they don't like. You don't feed them at all. Then usually they'll take a hint. You may have to put a lock on your refrigerator.
Devotees could never do that. We want to feed anybody and everybody.
I know. Well, devotees, yeah. Well, you may, unfortunately, hope you never have the experience of having someone that you really don't want to be there and stay there. Oh, okay. Anyway, back to happiness in the mode of passion. Any questions? So we got goodness and passion. Does anybody know what's next? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's text 39. Yad agre chanu bande cha sukham mohanam atmana nidralasya pramadotam tattamasam udaritam. And that happiness, which is blind to self-realization, which is delusion from beginning to end, and which arises from sleep, laziness, and illusion, is said to be in the nature of ignorance. Purport. One who takes pleasure in laziness and in sleep is certainly in the mode of darkness, ignorance. And one who has no idea how to act and how not to act is also in the mode of ignorance. For the person in the mode of ignorance, everything is illusion. There is no happiness, either in the beginning or at the end. For the person in the mode of passion, there might be some kind of ephemeral happiness in the beginning and at the end distress. But for the person in the mode of ignorance, there is only distress, both in the beginning and at the end. So a good example of happiness in the mode of ignorance is alcohol, drinking, intoxication. You get intoxicated and you think you're feeling real good. You make a complete fool of yourself. You ruin your whole life. Your whole family doesn't want to have anything to do with you. And you just, and you wind up, out in the street, in the gutter somewhere, and so many things. And you're considering this happy. There's no happiness in the beginning. In the beginning, also, when you drink liquor, drink alcohol, taste alcohol. That's what liquor is. It doesn't taste very good. So there's no happiness in the beginning, and there's no happiness in the middle. There's no happiness at the end. It's all just an illusion, darkness. I remember one devotee, though, which I liked. I mean, it's just funny what he said. He says, how can, one who takes pleasure in laziness and in sleep is certainly in the mode of darkness, ignorance. So he was mentioning just about sleep. He says, how can sleep be the mode of ignorance when it feels so good? Of course, when you need to sleep, it definitely feels good to sleep. And everyone has to sleep so many hours a day, but you minimize it. And actually, all successful people in history, very successful people, slept very little. So it's this correspondence even with material success and not sleeping so much. Nice thing Prabhupada said, if you're tired, which we were tired a lot, you can take what he called a snap. We heard of a nap. He called it a snap, where you would rest. Generally, just sit cross-legged on the floor with your head down and you rest. And he said for just 20 minutes and you're refreshed. And I found this interesting because when my son went to Cornell, and we went to Cornell, and there's this expert on sleep. He gave his whole life to studying sleep. And he gave these big lectures with hundreds of people would attend his lectures. And he figured out that all you need is 20 minutes of a nap to feel completely refreshed. And Prabhupada said that way before this guy this guy was still sleeping. So I don't know how Prabhupada knew 20 minutes, but this other guy came to the same exact conclusion after studying it for many years. Sleep. So if you're tired, you take a nap or a snap just 20 minutes. That's it. And then that's enough to refresh the body. Also, sleep, at least what I read some things about sleep from the materialist, the karmis, that it's not so much needed for the physical body. They can't figure out, but the brain needs to rest. You have to kind of, and that's one of the reasons it seems like Prabhupada never slept. Every one of his servants said he never slept. He was always conscious because he was already, he was controlled his brain completely. He was totally relaxed, meditating on Krishna all the time. I'm not saying that's the reason, but apparently that the karmis do say that you have to sleep because more for the mind than for the body. So laziness and sleep, these are, especially when you find such great pleasures in them, this is in the mode of ignorance. It's just a waste of time. It's just an illusion, because it says mode of ignorance is an illusion. Sleep is an illusion. You just dream of certain things. Unless you're Krishna conscious, then you're chanting Hare Krishna, you're thinking of Krishna's pastimes. Everything is related to Krishna when you're fully Krishna conscious. And Jiva just read something about even when you're in a coma, right? What was that?
I have the quote upstairs. That if we become very well practiced in chanting,
Can you hear her? I can't hear you.
No,
Can hear.
Speak loud.
I couldn't.
if we become very well practiced in chanting, that we take it to the mental and intellectual level, that even if one falls unconscious and enters a coma, he'll be able to chant the Hare Krishna mantra while in a coma. And that way he'll be able to leave his body while chanting.
Did you send me that? Is that from BBT, Jiva?
It's on the database. Prabhupada's talking to someone.
Yeah, go get it. Tell her.
Yeah.
She's gonna go get it.
Yeah, she sent me something from BBT in an email that I couldn't read at all, so I wasn't sure what that was.
So even in a coma, you're still chanting. Once you get so accustomed to chanting Hare Krishna,
Wow.
chant it in your sleep. There was a story I've heard from devotee who learns how to do all these pujas very, very elaborately, very, very, very Vedic, that he does these fire sacrifices. He said a story about which he was told, by his teachers, that there was a man who died, and he would perform all these sacrifices. And when he took bath, immediately there's mantras he would chant. So anyway, it was his dead body. And then when they had to bathe the dead body, when they first poured the water, he said he just started chanting these mantras, the dead body, because he was so accustomed to it. I'm not saying this is real. I don't know, but it was told by a devotee who was a really nice devotee, and he learned this and I mean, anything is possible, but sounds a little unlikely. But that's the idea, that he was still chanting. Well, I'm going to let Jiva explain this because I can't read her writing.
You can't read that?
Maybe I can, but you read it.
Okay. This is at the Magh Mela lecture in Prayag in January of 1971. Srila Prabhupada was lecturing on the Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, 2nd verse, 2nd chapter, text 45. I can't read either. Kirtanaya Sada Hari. Sada means always. Samane Swapane. The practice will be so perfect that when you are sleeping, when you are dreaming, you should not forget this chanting. That is the process. If you practice, it is possible that when you are sleeping, you will chant, because mind is not inactive even when you are sleeping. So if you become practiced up to the mind and intelligence platform of your life, then even when you are sleeping, Even when you are dreaming, you will be chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
And if this perfection is attained, then in coma stage of life, also, even if you cannot speak, at the time of death, internally, you will be able to chant Hare Krishna mantra, and that will guarantee your transferring from this material world to the spiritual world. That is the process. So that's how practiced we have to become.
Oh, very nice.
Okay, so we ended with that. Any last questions? You can ask Jiva too. Okay, well, let's offer our respectful obeisances to all the Vaishnava devotees. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha namo namaha.
Antakoti Vishwanda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.